Hello and welcome back. Are we recording? Where's the little light? Oh, it is there. It's just bright. Welcome back to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Andrea Knits, and today things look a little different. I actually rearranged my little area of the studio, so now I have another desk with no computer, and I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited to not sit in front of a computer when I'm not doing computer work, because otherwise I just feel like I obsessively check my email or whatnot. So anyways, today I am wearing my just released Harlow worsted, knit up in Brooklyn Tweed tones. Their tones line is super similar to Shelter. It actually knits up at the same gauge, so that is a great sub-in. But I love tones because it takes one color and they just dye it to two different shades. So one's lighter and one's darker, one's an overtone and one is an undertone. And I think that just always suits brioche so well. I designed this pattern for my own holiday gifting needs, but also just for a quick go-to hat pattern. And it also comes with video tutorials from the cast on to the brioche to the crown shaping and everything in between. Now it's just kind of those three, but yeah, and I show them all in both English and continental, so no matter how you hold your yarn. I also happen to be wearing an oldie but a goodie, the old Woolen Honey. So this is probably the pattern I'm most proud of. It's the one that I look at and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that. So this is also happens to be knit out of Brooklyn Tweed, their loft, so their fingering weight. I love a woolen spun yarn, and their yarn is woolen spun, which means it's really lightweight but really, really warm, because it traps air in the core of that yarn that our body heats up, and it insulates us and keeps us warmer. So it's also, working with a woolen spun yarn was the first time I knit a sweater that I really truly loved, and I think it was because of that light weightedness to the sweater. I kind of feel like I've said that before here. So anyways, I actually have a special guest back in the studio with me who's gonna help out with a question or two. So I'm just gonna try a little da-da-da. There he is. All right, are we both in here? Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. It was kind of weird being quiet that whole time.
It was very funny for me though. So I should link the last episode you were in. Just gonna write myself a little note here. Peter was in. Okay. So this is Spicy Pete. This is my husband Peter, also the photographer for Andrea Knits. And we had a couple questions we were gonna ask you.
Okay.
And he also made us coffee. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, question number one for Peter is down here. This is an oldie, so if you ever want to submit your own question, they get filtered into like a spreadsheet for me. You just go right below this video, there it says show description, blah, 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 show more. You just click that show more, and right at the bottom of all the show notes, I always put like links to things like the last episode Peter was in or what I'm wearing. And I also write out the questions. Anyways, if you ever want to submit a question, there's a link down there, and it filters it into this handy spreadsheet that I'm looking at over here to my left. And here's an oldie that slipped through the cracks back from March. So I'm not sure if this person is still watching, but I hope they are, because their question's going to be answered today.
Okay.
I'm sorry this is off topic, but I have wondered about it for a long time and just have to ask. Is your husband the Pete half of the duo Pete Peterson? I went to Michigan State in the early 2000s and was a big fan. Bought their CD and everything.
Wow.
When you mentioned him on your Instagram, I was like, whoa, small world. Now I'm fans of you both. I'm really sorry if it isn't him.
That's crazy. Yes, that's me. I'm Pete Peterson was, I think it was the first band situation I was ever in. I was a freshman in high school, and my friend John Peterson wrote amazing bluegrass songs, and we couldn't think of a band name because we would just play together. And he was like, well, my last name's Peterson. Your name's Pete. Let's just be Pete Peterson. And it actually worked.
School?
That was high school, yeah.
So how long did you continue?
Into my freshman year of college. He went to Michigan State too. So we played gigs around town, and we always, people loved us. Like, I mean, John he's this great entertainer, amazing songwriter. He was basically the band, and I was just kind of sitting next to him playing some Stevie Ray Vaughan solos over a bluegrass song, you know.
Yeah,
he was very supportive of my journey as a guitarist. I'd be playing like progressive rock stuff, and it's just like over folk music. I don't know about that, but
he is like the nicest person.
Very nice person. So that's crazy. Yeah, we had some fun playing good shows.
Yeah. So Peter and I went to high school together. We haven't been together since high school though. We ran in different crowds.
What she's meaning to say is I was a loser.
No. We have different memories of how we remember each other from high school.
It is crazy that we went to a high school that I don't remember like we didn't have classes together.
Not taken.
What?
It sounded like you were about to say, I don't remember a single thing about you.
No, I remember you very well. It's just crazy that we never had a class together. We never really...
We were in our own angsty, like, long relationships.
Yeah.
You know, like that, like, first big relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, are you ready for another question?
Yes.
Okay. Does Spicy Pete use manual mode for shooting? They are talking about photography. And does he shoot in RAW?
I do shoot in RAW.
Do you know why you do that?
I
didn't give you a lot of time to consider your answers.
I mean, again, I'm not like, I don't have professional answers for this,
Right.
but I remember when I first started shooting, I remember reading that shooting in RAW gives you the most freedom after the fact.
It's like the biggest, truest file of the photo, I think.
It's true, exactly.
So like can make more adjustments. Sorry, I'm now trying to answer for you.
No, because you know more about cameras than I do. I think the camera compresses the image if you don't shoot RAW, and so compression is adjusting, you know, the integrity of the picture. So I just thought, well, I want to do all the adjusting.
No, I think that's really good because it's if you think about, so anybody who's familiar with using like a DSLR or anything, I think even our little Canon power shots had the option to shoot in RAW.
Did it?
I think it did.
Wow, that's surprising.
They were great little cameras. But if you think about, so the file size of a RAW image is massive. It's lots of...
Pixels.
I was going to say gigabytes, megabytes.
Gigabytes.
Or bigger than a megabyte.
Yep.
Whereas a JPEG is going to be way smaller.
Yes.
So you have to think about, like, if you're compressing it to a smaller size, you got to lose something.
Yeah, and I don't really know.
We're so technical.
I don't know what gets lost. I don't know what, you know, I mean, I think we've all seen those pictures on the internet where it's like looks like super low res. Like what did this picture go through? And I don't know if that
maybe
has something to do with that.
I do think it comes down to what you can. I don't know. Now we're just making things up.
Yeah. I do shoot in RAW. And what was the other part? Oh, the
manual mode.
Yes, I shoot in aperture value, which is the same as aperture priority, which, as we were just talking about,
You want me to answer?
I think you know more about it than I do.
So as I mentioned before, I took some photography classes online, and I have to say, I'm pretty stoked at what I remember. Because he is the natural. Like, he's the person also with music. He's one of those people where he just listens to the song and then he can just play it. So you have this uncanny ability to just do things where I think for me, I have to like learn all about them. Anyways.
I feel like you're more like that than I am.
Like Sunny. So with aperture priority, basically what you're doing is you're keeping your flexibility. You get to decide that you're going to adjust the aperture, but the camera's like, hey, don't worry, I've got your back when it comes to shutter speed and ISO.
Yeah, I remember when we first got our Canon, I went straight to auto because I was like, I just want to see how good the picture
I think it's a great
look.
place to start.
It's a good place to start, and I liked it, but I remember thinking there's like it's too much brightness or there's too much light coming in.
Yeah, because it's that is what it's shooting for when it is in that auto mode. It's just basing it, in my understanding, on the light.
Yes.
So it's trying to get a perfect exposure, but we don't always want that. Like for you, you shoot really moody photos that tend to be a little bit on the darker side. So you're usually trying to take it a little darker. And then there's just some situations where you don't have great light, and that's where you
have to adjust.
Mess with ISO. I shoot in full manual.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm confident enough to do that.
That was like the best part of taking those classes. So I took Creative Live classes, and they have ones that you can take for your specific camera. And it just helped me so much. And you're always, when you shoot manual, you're just trying to find that balance yourself. But once you find the balance, then you can tweak it to more how you want it to look.
Okay.
But I think a lot of even professionals shoot in aperture priority. I think that's super common.
I remember I mentioned it in our last video about following Instagram profiles. I remember actually there's a photographer I follow, Meg Lowe, I think is her handle. And she listed that as what she shot in. And I loved her photos. I was like, I'm going to do that.
I wonder if Steph does. Steph might even too. We have a good friend, one of my best friends from high school is a professional photographer.
Yeah. There's something, I don't know, there's just something about that look that resonated with me right off the bat. I remember we took, maybe I said this last time, but I remember we took the first picture of Find Your Fade.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't, like this looks, it's done. This picture is it. Like I didn't even have to tweak it.
Would you say that's still your favorite photo shoot we've done?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Was it yours too?
Oh, I think I've moved on, but I feel like you always bring it up as like the creme de la creme.
Well, it was the snowing and
it was very magical.
Yeah.
So when I did Find Your Fade, we had, was Levi born? Or was it just Olive?
I think he had just been born. Well, it was in the fall that we did that.
He was born because I was wearing it while carrying him, like in a carrier. Okay, so Levi was born. Whew, the memories just fade. So my mom came over and we literally had like 15 to 30 minutes.
We were on a time crunch.
To run out and take these photos. And so we went to this trail I used to run on. I remember I had to run. Then I had like heels, or like heeled boots, and I had to take them off and run.
We had to walk.
Barefoot.
Yeah, we had to walk. We parked and we couldn't get to the shoot location.
No, we had to.
It was like a half mile.
Yeah,
it was cold.
We didn't have time,
You didn't
and
have
I didn't
boots.
have shoes.
Yeah.
So I had to put on like you let me wear your boots. Like we kept trading back and forth to keep our feet warm.
I
We were
know.
just running in socks.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And then right as we started taking photos, big fluffy flakes started falling.
And the lighting was so good. You know, it was 5:30ish in the fall, so there was no sun really. It was just like an overcast.
I think it was more like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Was it?
5:30 would have been dark.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Oh, boy.
3 o'clock it is.
But no, it was magical.
Yeah.
It was, because we literally did it in about 15 minutes and then had to get home. Those fluffy flakes, I really love a fluffy flake.
Yeah, and I remember when I took the photo and I could see the snow falling around you, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing that you can see the detail.
Yeah.
The sure shot or power shot couldn't have done that.
No, it was great.
Yeah.
It was good. For anybody who doesn't know what raw mode is, just to, or I guess I kind of already said it. It's when you're shooting, instead of auto, you're controlling your aperture, shutter, and ISO. Should I explain what, should I tell them my little way of knowing what those are?
Oh yeah, that's really helpful.
We were talking about this before we started. So the best way, because I think it can be really confusing because they all kind of do similar things. They all affect the light. And so it can be really hard to remember which is which and how it's going to affect things. But I loved that one person told me that the aperture, now I feel like this is boring, but the aperture is like your eye dilating. So how much, so when it's darker out, we need it to dilate more, to see more, to get more light in. When it's brighter out, you want to close down your aperture, just like your pupil will be more tiny, to avoid letting too much light in. And then the shutter is blinking. It's like your eyelids.
How fast it
and
blinks.
how fast it blinks. So when you're moving, you want that shutter speed to be fast
Like an
because you're
eagle.
trying to catch it. But if you're trying to let more light in to get like a low
Nighttime
light shot,
photography, or, yeah.
then you're gonna have to keep that shutter open more, but then you really can't move the camera at all because it will get all that movement, and that's when you get like the blurry photos. ISO is just funky. I feel like the thing to remember about ISO is that you want to keep it as close to 200 as you can. And that's just the rule I go by. I think it's 200, so.
There you go.
I used to have an analogy for that one too, but obviously I don't care.
I thought it was, I remember you did something with your arm, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. ISO is like
like a few minutes ago?
I don't, it was like a while ago. That might be just thinking of something else completely.
I think of like what I did. All right. Well, there's your questions.
Okay.
Do you want to share anything else?
No, shout out Pete Peterson.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Pete Peterson.
We're not available anywhere. I don't think any of our music's online, so.
Do you think any of those CDs still exist besides our
We
friend?
did a press run. We did a pressing of some CDs. They're
Do you still
definitely
have any?
they're probably underneath seats in cars all across the country.
Yeah. What about you? Do you have one?
Yeah, I do.
You know what we should do? We should like play one at the end of this.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Can you do
I've got
that?
all the MP3s on my
Should
computer.
we just like right now do like
says
six slow?
that she's leaving. Don't just stop and watch her go. Cause if that sweet little woman, she's worth a retrieving, I'm sure y'all already know. I don't keep it all inside.
Done. All right. Well, thanks.
All right.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
See you in a minute.
Love you too.
Will you move this back to where it goes?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, there was our segment with Spicy, and now I have a few more questions to answer. And at the end, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how long this gets. I might have something else to show, but I'm still deciding if the video I took is fun to watch or not. But I'll put it at the end if I add it. And that way, if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to. But let's get back to some questions. Oh, I loved this. So I feel like I haven't done any knitwear questions, design questions in a while. So this is a good one. I have wondered what program you use for charting. So I actually just had to learn a new one. I used to use Stitch Mastery, but after the last I use an Apple computer. After the last couple updates, I cannot get that program to work to save my life. I have kicked everything off my computer, reloaded it, like tried all the things and could not get it to work anymore. So my amazing tech editor, Megan Schmaltz, taught me how to use Illustrator, and it's just opened up this whole new world. So I already use the Adobe suite. It has like InDesign, Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator. So a lot of people do use it. But I pretty much only ever used Lightroom for editing photos, and InDesign is what my pattern layout is in. And I only know how to use that because my amazing sister-in-law, Brittany, is the one who designed her and my little sister, Katie Rose, for my Christmas gift years ago. They designed a new logo for me. So my current logo is one that they designed. And Brittany did a whole new layout for me. So how my patterns currently look are all thanks to her. And she did like this real quick kind of set up my thing for me, and so I can just go in and adjust for new patterns. But even that was, I don't know, I kind of talk a lot about how like not super technology driven. So I'm so happy I know how to use InDesign. I'm happy that's where I do my layouts now. I will also quickly just side note, I do think that you can absolutely do PDFs even just in Pages. If you have Macintosh or an Apple, whatever, or you could use just Microsoft Word, right? That would be the other one. And I think that they can be fine. But I do feel very lucky that I had somebody who she used to do like magazine layout and stuff. So she really had an eye for knowing how to get that all in there. Anyways, I digress. So, Megan Schmaltz, my amazing tech editor, also the person that you may have seen answering your emails. If you've emailed me for pattern questions, she is a great friend, and I'm so thankful for all of her help, and is a whiz with Illustrator and charting. And so she taught me the other day and took all the fear out of it. So Illustrator is how I do charts. If you already know Illustrator, I do think I've seen like YouTube tutorials for this online. I wish I could offer better advice on how to get into it if you don't either know somebody or look up those tutorials. If anybody else knows of a good way to learn charting or has any other charting program ideas, please feel free to throw those in the comments, because I think that's kind of one of the road bumps of becoming a designer, is figuring out stuff like those charts. I mean, the other day I hand wrote it, like I drew it. It looked nice, but I had to draw it and just put it in as a photo while I was transitioning between the two programs. So, and I mean, that's an option. You can hand draw. I'll get to this later, but I do all my designing in a dot grid journal. So it looks, yeah, you can see those dots. So it looks like that, which makes it great because I can make a chart on there. They also have these, which is knitter's graph paper, which can be fun for playing with designs. So you could maybe use that as well. I would prefer the dot grid personally for charting. Okay, and then there's more to this question. How do you get inspiration for a design? I'm gonna save that for last and jump to the third part, which is how long was it before you moved into sweater design? So I actually should really look at when it was. I definitely started with, hold on, I'm just bringing this up real quick because I can see when I published it. I definitely started with like hats and mittens, and then I did like stoles and scarves that didn't have a lot of shaping, just to get the feel for it and for like figuring out my layout. Like, I don't think you have to jump in to just sweaters. There's people who don't design sweaters at all. Now that I design sweaters, I think in sweaters. I almost always start with a sweater idea and have to remind myself, like, ooh, you know what would be nice? I could use a new hat or some new socks or a shawl. But so I published my first pattern in 2014, and I published my first sweater in 2016. Wow. I'm kind of surprised it took me. So it was November 2014 and then January 2016. So it was actually just over a year and a couple months. That sounds more right from my memory. So yeah, I think that once you've gotten comfortable with some of those smaller patterns, especially, I think it's really nice to offer things like mittens or hats, socks. Those can be a great place to start with grading patterns too, and figuring out different sizes on a much smaller scale. So, because that's really the trickiest part, I think, for me about sweaters is sizing it for a whole bunch of different sizes instead of just the one size. So that can be a bit tricky. Okay, and let's go back to how do you get inspiration for a design. So a lot of the time, I think, and I should like sit with this question and really think about it sometimes, because sometimes it comes from the yarn, sometimes the yarn comes after. But I think in general, I really love to learn new things. And so I love to flip through stitch dictionaries. My two favorites are up here. I don't know if you can't see, they're out of frame. So all my notebooks are pulled out. Okay. So two of my faves, you can see lots of little post-its. These are a Treasury of Knitting Patterns by Barbara Walker. There's at least 4 of these. There's a green and a yellow as well. And so I'll just flip through and see what catches my eye. I'll play around. This was just one night playing around with slip stitches, and I started increasing, and by the end of my swatch I realized it looked like the wedge of a yoke, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make this into a yoke sweater, and I was so excited. So yeah, I think that it's usually learning something new, kind of spawns this interest in, oftentimes it's a stitch pattern or playing with color. Color is definitely a driving force for me. And then, yeah, there will just be, I then kind of exhaust it. I'm like, okay, what if I do this? And then I'm going to try this. And then I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to learn something new. And I start again. Sometimes deadlines also help push different ideas. I've done collaborations in the past where, especially early on, when the business I was collaborating with had a pretty specific idea. Like there was one collaboration I did where they wanted it to include brioche, and they even had the yarn that they wanted me to use. And so from there, I had kind of these constraints to think within, and I think that can be helpful. I think where it can be a little challenging is when you just have too many choices, like too many options. And that's when I always just like say to myself, like, simplify, 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 because it's really easy to want to add all the things. So that's kind of when I take a little back out and go from there. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. All right, I am curious how you keep track of all your work projects. Where are you? Oh, not where are you? Where you are, what still needs done, and plan out your timelines. Do you use an app or a planner, just notes in a notebook? So this is my spinning journal. It is actually the Lina knitting notes book, but I use it for spinning. So in something like this, I tend to stick like the fiber tags in here and they all fall out. But so I put as many details as I can, like the name, who it's from, the colors in it, how much it weighed, what its fiber content is, and then I will put how I'm spinning it, if I'm splitting it up into sections, how much each one weighs. And look at, I even do like little notes about how it turned out. And what I used it for. Well, this was a really good one. I'm not always that on top of it. But yeah, so that is, I want these in here. That is what I do for my spinning. We'll get to that thought in a second. For designing, I have all of I actually just the other day, I've been doing a major studio clean out, and I found some of like my very first knitting notebooks and even some of my early design ones. So generally what I do is these are my favorite notebooks. I've linked them a whole bunch of times. They're dot grid minis from Behance. I like them because they're spiral bound, so I can do this and it will lay flat. I don't like a seam for these notebooks. And these are pretty heavy paper and they have dot grids, which I like, so I can do everything from like sketching to charting to math. So like for instance, here is me working out math in a pattern. Yeah, all the things. So this is what I do. Charting. So yeah, I use this for all my projects. Once I fill one up, I start a new one. I am learning some new organizational techniques for this though. I am getting into bullet journaling, which I have to say is very satisfying. So I am trying to decide if I will have one journal that rolls them all, and I will include things like my spinning and my designing in my one bullet journal, or if I'm going to keep them separate. So I'm figuring that out. But I'm absolutely a notebook and pen person. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some of the bullet journal methods and apply them to keep these more organized, because I could not tell you where old projects are in all these notebooks. So even just adding an index I think would be really, really helpful, especially because a lot of times I'm always sketching ideas, but then I finish that notebook, it goes up on my shelf, I start a new one. Do you think I ever remember to look back through? Not really. So I'm hoping to do some new organization. I don't know why I'm putting that up there. I need that. I'm not done with that one yet. So that's what I use. I don't use anything digital. It's So one of the things I think that really drew me to the bullet journal method is I don't want to be on my phone or my computer more than I have to. You know, I think it's so easy I'll pick up my phone and all of a sudden 20 minutes later, I don't know why I picked up my phone, but I've just been like scrolling Instagram for 20 minutes or looking at just things, and it stresses me out. Maybe I'm the only one that feels that way. I don't think I am though, but I just really don't want to spend my life on my phone. Like, I don't want to look back on my life and be like, where did it all go? Like, I don't want it to be this. So I think that keeping things to pen and paper, I also store them better and remember things better. I understand things better when it is written word. Like, I used to, years ago when iPads were first a thing, I got one and I got a whole bunch of books on it and realized very quickly, oh, I can't read digital books. It's like they don't sink into my head. Anyone else have that issue? Okay, next question. 2 questions. We're actually getting like tons of bonus questions in here if y'all haven't noticed. Like every single one of these has like 3 questions. Do you ever use a yarn bowl when knitting? I have made one. It's downstairs in our living room, sitting on a shelf. No, I don't use a yarn bowl. She also asked why or why not. Basically, I'm not gonna move a bowl around with me. Is basically what happens. I don't ever just knit in one spot, and I always carry my knitting around the house. So I have bags, as I've shown many episodes before, that I'm always carrying. My kids just see me walking around with a bag at all times. And I just move it. I move it around the house. It has its little positions. Even if I never end up knitting, it comes with me. It also carries my journals, my pens, my glasses, my water. So that's just what works well for me. I don't really have an issue with yarn tangling. If I do have a project that seems to have that issue, what I would do is just take a smaller, softer project bag and put that within my big bag. But yeah, I do think they're very beautiful. I knit in a different place all the time. I think they would be ideal for somebody who knits in one spot. And what are your thoughts on charted versus written patterns? I'm very comfortable with charted patterns, but I'm interested to hear a designer's take on this. Do you feel the need to provide written instructions for a pattern, even if you started from a charted version? So I've also talked about charting in previous episodes. I think that charts can be a bit of a polarizing topic. There are some people who really, really dislike them, and there are some people who will only work for them. Pros to charts are that it's a universal language. So no matter which language you speak, you can follow if the chart looks the same. I do think that there are some patterns that make more sense charted, because trying to write out a color work chart would be very, very confusing and take up so much space. I think cable charts can be the same way. But I do also understand, my suggestions for anyone who's maybe newer to chart reading is, I actually started out, I did a lace shawl. It was seed to sprout. Oh my gosh, what's her name? I'm gonna remember her name as soon as I end this. But I was very new to charting at the time, and I didn't have the pattern printed. And this was like in the, anyways, too much detail, Andrea. So I found, for me to really start to understand that chart, I actually wrote it out myself. And that helped me then kind of make that leap. But basically, to answer your question, if it's something that I can offer both directions, I do. If it's something that has a very large cable or any color work chart, those don't get written out. But when it comes to especially cable charts or a really large lace chart, it's just not feasible space-wise to write out those instructions. Tin Can Knits also has a great tutorial on chart reading. So if you are new to it or you haven't enjoyed it in the past, I recommend checking out their blog post and yeah, giving it another go. The nice thing about charts is that they look like what you are knitting. So they are a visual representation of that, except for brioche. Brioche, because it is every row's worked twice, even for me, and I'm pretty comfortable with charts, I think that they kind of look like gobbledygook. Okay, let's keep moving. Hi, do you try on your sweaters while you are knitting them? If so, how do you go about it? I have been hearing lately about cords or using extra yarn. So I love this question because it's one of those things that I think can be taken for granted, that you just assume people know how to do this. But why would we know how to do this if we've never done it? So I was talking to another knitter about this a few months ago and was like, oh, hello, like we have to learn these things. Not everyone knows this. So I love that this question came up. So what I do if I am knitting a sweater, generally it's when they are being knit from the top down that a lot of people talk about trying them on as you go. So you can't just leave it on the needles it's currently on, because you have to get it over big areas like your shoulders. And you generally, my favorite time to try on a sweater is right after, like about a ½ inch after I've split for the sleeves, because I just find there's a little more stability there and it's gonna let me know how the yoke fits. And then anytime after that to check for length. But so generally what you wanna do is you can absolutely just put some smooth waste yarn on your tapestry needle and run that through all your live stitches and take your needle out and try it on. That's definitely an option. It's a little fiddly, but can be done. Hold on. Another option is to use a longer cord. So when people say that, they're generally talking about interchangeable needles. I, for instance, have one of the longer cords they offer. I think it's maybe 64 inches is my longest cord. So I like that one for shawl collars when I'm knitting like a whole long collar onto a sweater, and for trying on. And so I just put a needle tip onto one end of that and then feed it through enough stitches so that's whatever is left on the cord I'm using, the stitches can't fall off of there. And then I try it on. And so all you need to do is you need to make sure that when you're trying on your sweater, there's enough room for those stitches to stretch out to put the sweater on without accidentally losing stitches off of your needle. But I just learned about these. So these are from the Knitting Barber, and it is these silicone cords that are, oh, there's water in it. I used this recently to block a cowl that you block before seaming, so you have to put live stitches on waste yarn, or you can use one of these silicone cords. So this thing is amazing. I will link it below. I can't believe I just learned about these. So what you do is you just stick the tip of your needle into the end of this silicone cord, and it like, that wasn't a good one, sorry. There we go. And it kind of like suctions on. Da, da, da. And so then you can just pull and get all your stitches on here, and it comes in different lengths. So there is a 60-inch length, 150 centimeters, and then there's two 30-inch. This is the 30-inch, which is 75 centimeters. And then you just bunk and pop it off. So I'm digging these. I really like them. So yeah, you can put it on here. You can also bottom up sweaters. You can definitely, at least you could put the body around you and kind of hold it up. It's just a different experience to the top down, but I talked about that in a previous episode, and you definitely can try it that way. So I think that was it, because the other questions were for Spicy Pete, which is good because this is getting mighty long. Oh, and I still have my bonus video. I don't know if y'all are gonna want to watch it. I basically took a spinning class last Saturday, yarn spinning, not this kind of spinning, and for woolen spun yarns. It was so much fun. And I finished my samples. So in the video, I just kind of walk you through, I show you all these samples with my overhead camera, and how I learned. If you couldn't tell, I started here. And just all the different things we did. It was really amazing. And now I just finished all my swatches. So this one is so funny. This was a hand carded. Do you see that big gray stripe in the middle? Don't know where that came from. But yeah, so I just did swatches for all these too. So they're still damp. I just pulled them out of the bath. But, this one. So anyways, I will do my best to add that video onto this one for anyone who's just interested in a little spinning content and a little spinning action. I actually this morning started the morning by spinning samples. So I tend to feel like there's just never enough time. And so I do things, which I think would be the equivalent to a knitter who doesn't swatch, where like I won't sample yarn when I'm spinning. I will just cross my fingers. I did so when I spun my last sweaters quantity, which turned out so good. I will say that I still haven't knit it because I love it so much that I'm like, it has to be the perfect project. This is a little ball of it. But I'm so stoked with how that turned out. But I mean, it was just sheer luck because that was like 24 ounces of fiber, or 28. It was almost 2 pounds that I just spun. And could you imagine all that time I spent doing that if it hadn't turned out good? Which, you know, I've had some doozies too. So anyways, I am spinning some CVM that I got from Michigan. I wonder if the tag's in here so I can tell you who it's from. But, so what are the ones? Oh, it is. Yes, it is from Never Say Never Farm, which is in Alto, Michigan. And yeah, CVM. So I kind of want to try spinning it woolen for a sweater, but I'm also trying to decide, okay, after one day, do I really feel like my woolen skills are up to par to spin all this fiber? Or is it going to change drastically throughout the process? Or will I just like it better worsted spun? So I did some samples this morning. They are also drying right now, but I'm super stoked to actually like properly set up this project. So yeah, I'll share more about that as it comes along. But this is a long one, so I'm gonna finally end this here or in 10 minutes after that other video. But I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for joining me and Spicy Pete. And yeah, these will be linked below. I think that's all I got. Maybe I'll show you my new desk real quick. And by new desk, I mean family desk that was just, okay, sorry, whoa, okay. That was just given to us. Look at that. Cubbies, places for my pens and pencils. Da, 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 ba, ba. Moved the garland. There we go. So this is where I hope to be spending more of my time instead of in front of the computer, which is covered in yarn right now. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hi there. I thought it would be fun if I showed you something I just learned. So this past weekend, I got to go over to Port Fiber, an amazing fiber shop owned by my friend Casey. She's the one who actually originally taught me how to spin yarn. And she brought in another amazing teacher named Melanie who taught us woolen spinning. So let me show you what I did. These are my samples from class. And let's start with the ugly. Let me see if I can get a little closer here. So this is my first one. This was the point of the class where actually maybe it's helpful to be back out so you can kind of see the whole thing. So I definitely, and maybe if you've ever taken any class to learn something new, maybe you can relate. I very much was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. All right, let me zoom back in so you can see some of this thick and thin texture up close. So definitely very much full of these fluffy neppy bits. Let me show you. There's one part that, oh my goodness, here's a good one. I think I could get even closer. This might be too close. Yeah, lots of this happening. I ended up just chain plying all of my samples because I wanted to spun them all onto one bobbin. Yeah, it all just kind of, it's very thick and thin. It's kind of like a big woolly monster that was on my bobbin. I very much felt like a first-time spinner again, but yes, it was that moment when you're taking a class and all of a sudden you get struck with this thought of, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do this. And am I the only one in class who won't be able to do this? So I was a little concerned, but I kept trying. So this was the very beginning. Then, so that is just some carded roving. That's pretty, I mean, short fibers every which way, very rustic. This is after I'd been practicing a little bit. So there you can see a little improvement here. Part of this was definitely the fiber prep for me was pretty challenging. You can see I started to have like moments of it kind of smoothing out a little bit. I mean, woolen spun is always, you know, full of air. You're not trying to smooth those fibers down as you spin. So it's always going to look a little more rough and ready, but yeah, this preparation especially was challenging because as the fiber would draft out, there'd be one big clump all together and then nothing. So it was very interesting trying to get the hang of it. But you can kind of see a little improvement. So this is why we keep trying. We don't give up. Here we go. So you can see, and then, okay. Oh, something just fell down behind me. Okay. So from there, we then tried, this was combed top that had been dyed. And then we put it through the drum carder to kind of rearrange some of those fibers so they weren't all just like smoothly overlapping each other, so that we could spin it woolen style. Now there are things I can already hear some of you really good spinners, you veteran spinners out there saying, well, so there are things called, there's true woolen spinning and true worsted spinning, and you have to have prepared the fiber the correct way to have a true woolen or a true worsted spun fiber. So this class was focusing mostly on the actual woolen spinning method. The long draw method is basically what we were mostly, that's not true. We actually did more than long draw. Anyways, I digress. But so I just want to say, I do realize that I may be fudging it up here a little bit when it comes to speaking about woolen versus worsted, because you do specifically actually have to have the fiber prepped a certain way to truly spin it woolen. But yeah, so this was from a combed dyed braid that we then put through the drum carder. And once I tried this one, I finally started to get the hang of it, where I felt like, okay, that's starting to make sense. So I actually went from my first one, which is this one, and then I tried some of this, and then I went back and spun the rest of that fiber. And that's when it got a little bit better, because I think this helped me actually connect, okay, the hand motions. You know, there's just a lot to put together between your feet, your hands, and your brain. So this helped. I'd say that this was one of the easier ones for me. And yeah, obviously it's still pretty thick and thin. I noticed that I think my time between when I originally, like in the class was spinning it, it felt really, really good. I felt like I was being consistent. And then I got home and we learned 2 other drafting methods, which I'll show you in a second. And I think I kind of forgot a little bit what I was doing. And I I also wasn't in the best state of mind for spinning, and I just wanted to get it done because I wanted to finish all my samples and wash them and be able to look at them. So I think I rushed it. So the first half of the skein's kind of like nice and pretty consistent, and then it got a little rougher and just more uneven for what I rushed through. So, you know, if you're not in the mood, step away from the wheel. That's what I always say. Okay. Next up, we did more painted combed top, except for this time we pulled off sections of, oh my gosh, I bet everyone's shouting, it's called this staple length. There we go. And we wrapped it around our finger, and then we spun from the tip. This is really nice because if you have a painted braid and you want to keep those colors, you don't want to completely blend them all together. That's kind of the way to do it with woolen spinning from what I could understand. But I don't know. It really slowed me down. And so I don't know if it's something I would gravitate towards again. I also felt like it was kind of challenging, and I'm sure it's getting used to it and practicing. But I think the thing that would keep me from doing this method is basically how much it slowed me down. But I think it turned out pretty good. And then we did rollags, which if you are a newer spinner like myself, I would always see those cute little rollags, and I was just like, but why? I don't understand what anyone uses those for. So now I get it, and it was so much fun. So we got to help make our own rollags, again, just out of combed top that we then put onto a blending board, and then we made rollags and got to spin them, and then we did what's called a double draft. I hope I'm remembering that correctly. And this was very satisfying, and I feel like I got a pretty nice spin on that one. It's really lightweight, full of air, super bouncy. So it was really fun. I may or may not want to purchase a blending board in the future to make rollags. As you can see, you know, still some thick and thin, but these are just my practices. And then we did hand carded. So we got some blocks that were full of lanolin, which I actually really enjoy. And we hand carded them using hand carders and turned those into rollags and spun them. I have to say, I don't think I'll be purchasing hand carders. I can totally see why people would. But they triggered in me this carpal tunnel pain I used to have as a baker. And again, it's the slow thing. I think I very much fall into that, oh, there's just not enough time in the day kind of a person, especially right now. So I only have, oh, look at this little weak spot. Oh, that must be my end that's tied in. It is. Never mind. Anyways, I don't know when I will have time for that. I think I would end up defaulting to my drum carder. But I really do like spinning from the rollags. I like that double draft. But I think I would prefer being able to do something like the blending board to make the rollags, not hand carding, because it was just a little challenging on my hands. That being said, I definitely think it's something to try, especially if you want to purchase like your own fleece and do it from start to finish. I could see how that would be really fun. But unfortunately, I don't think it's in the cards for these little hands. So anyways, I'm gonna knit some samples up and we'll see what this fabric looks like, and then I'll show you some of that. Okay, bye.